Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Sib. I hope you had a great weekend. Sorry, we're a little bit later. There was my meeting overran, and so I've just had a few minutes as usual with my guests. And today it's Barry, who I'll introduce in a second. But yeah, a bit of a delay my side, and then we had a couple of tech glitches. But fingers crossed, it's all settled and we're all set up and ready. So looking forward to today's interview. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm going to be speaking today with Barry from the Conservative Disability Group. I think it's, as Barry and I were just discussing before, we're not going to get into party politics. It's very much around what the CDG are up to in terms of disability within the Conservative Party. And yeah, we may chat around some policies that the Conservatives are looking at around disability, but it's going to be very much Barry's story, Barry's background, and how the CDG got going, and just really, having a really interesting chat around those issues. I just wanted to frame the conversation for those of you watching. And as always, do feel free to bring your questions and thoughts, and I'll bring up the ones that are really nice and appropriate. But yeah, we're not going to get into any party politics today. So Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martin.
And yeah, as always, could you just give us a little couple of minutes, or however long you need, but a sort of punchy bio would be great to start us off.
Okay, so I'm Barry Ginley. I'm totally blind myself. I've been partially sighted and totally blind throughout all of my life. So sort of I come with a lived disability experience. I sort of run my own consultancy, Tamstone Consulting, part-time, and also I work for one of our national museums as Equality and Access Advisor. But I've been involved with politics for about the past sort of 10, 15 years. And one of my aims is to try and make politics more accessible. And I'm currently leading on project for the Conservative Disability Group on making our politics more accessible. That's sort of within the Conservative Party itself. And that's to try and sort of encourage people at all levels to stand as candidates and to be sort of constituency representatives, etc. Because we do need to reflect society. The number of MPs in Westminster is so low. It's 5 MPs out of 650 have declared a disability.
That's interesting. Do you have any idea, and not sort of wondering about every single person, but broadly what kind of disability the 5 have? Do you know that?
The 2 Conservative members that I know of, one is dyslexic and one has a physical disability.
Yeah, that's interesting. What sort of types of disability are represented as well?
Sure. And I think a lot of MPs and also other parliamentarians and candidates don't always sort of want to declare a disability. That's what we found in our recent research. And some people, just wouldn't self-identify as having a disability.
Yeah, so I don't know if you caught the interview I did on Friday with Sarah and Leighton. They run their own consultancy and disabled people's organisation in Wales. So they do work with businesses and with charities, but they've set up this big campaign around with politics as well. So there's actually quite a lot of similar sentiments were discussed. And I think what they said and what I've become more aware of is this whole thing around disclosure, and that's whether it's in business or it's in politics, is that there's always this caution maybe for people to say what their disability is and to disclose. Like, even the word sometimes sounds maybe a bit mysterious or something like that. But when people are asked what are your needs, whether that's an access need or just generally, if you don't have a disability, what do you need to do your job properly and to become or be a good politician? It's all the same whether it's business or politics. Then people are more happy and able to say, well, actually, I would need this and this because of a disability, and they found that inverted commas disclosure rate went up quite a lot. So is that something you've found? Because I wanted to just mention that the similar sentiments on Friday, but it'd be great to get your experience as well.
Cool. And I think it's similar in politics and standing as candidates as it is in employment in general, that some organisations are more sort of using the government's project disability confidence, where others are less so. And it's whether people are sort of confident themselves in declaring their disability, because I know that for some jobs I've applied for in the past, for example, that I've got a good feeling that I was turned down because of my disability, even though that's the right qualifications and experience for the roles, and very much be sort of for in politics. When I was on the parliamentary candidates list for the party, in one of the interviews I attended for a seat, I was asked about my disability by a member. Now, the chair did say, sorry, that's an illegal question, but I was happy to answer it personally because it was the elephant in the room. That's what everybody else was thinking. And I was able to explain the kind of additional support I might need. Often, I imagine, like in business, sort of organisations will feel, oh, it's going to cost a fortune to make those adjustments. It's not necessarily that. So, some of it is just sort of, if you like, doing politics in a different way.
Yeah.
Sort of going ahead to sort of post leaflets each week. It might be sort of more telephone calls or social media, or sort of larger meetings to meet people. So it's doing sort of it sort of differently. So therefore, it sort of makes the candidate's life easier to be able to still get out and talk to the people they're looking to represent.
Yeah, I mean, that's, people, whether disabled or not, have different skill sets as well. So even if someone doesn't have a inverted comma sort of labeled disability, but they are, great face to face, but not as good with, writing or vice versa. There's an element of playing to your strengths. But then, of course, there are certain disabilities or impairments that have barriers that, maybe there needs to just be that technological reasonable. In the end, it's reasonable adjustments, really, isn't it? When we look at the Equalities Act 2010, it's exactly what are the reasonable adjustments to enable someone to do the thing they want to do it better. So you're saying you're like a consultancy role with the CDG, is that right?
Well, I'm the deputy chair of the CDG, but
you do consultancy as your job in separate ways.
That's right. Yes. So, so they both actually work together, because the kind of work I would do in consultancy feeds well into sort of the kind of projects we're looking to develop within the party itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'd be great to hear a bit more. Why was the CDG formed? Or I don't know whether you were founding or not, but it'd just be good to understand sort of what prompted the need for it. I mean, you've intimated it, but just a bit more about the specifics of it starting up.
Okay, so the CDG, actually, it's our 30th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's been around a while.
So, yeah, so it's been going, and we still have a few of our founding members on board with us, which was great. So, so it was set up to try and sort of make the party sort of more inclusive, and to sort of champion sort of disability within the party itself. And so we're all sort of party members, and the group was formed to sort of promote disability, and to try and sort of affect sort of party policy, as well as sort of ensuring that every member can participate.
Yeah.
And so, we've had challenges, over the years. Say I've been involved for about 10, 15 years now. And so, I've seen some considerable changes within the party. Some good, some not so. But that's just life anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I mean, I'd say we always do sort of past, the backstory, and then we sort of bring up to kind of where we are today. And I'm keen to get into sort of COVID-19 and the various implications it must have had, both for how the group works, and just the remote nature now, and also the newer sort of barriers or considerations. But before we get there, is there anything more sort of historically that you'd like to mention?
Well, in more sort of in recent years. So for what we've done, for many years, the party was sort of a party conference having sort of British Sign Language on stage, and I know that's been a very big topic
I was
recently.
going to say, yeah.
And then for some reason it was dropped some years ago, but for the past 2 years we've had BSL interpretation back on stage at the party conference. When we've run our own fringe events at conference, we've introduced speech to text, and that. So we're trying to sort of get back, because say things had dropped off a bit. So we're trying to sort of be more proactive again, and we've got a whole new team involved now, and so we've got a good sort of chair who's really wanting to sort of bring us well into the 21st century, not just sort of lagging behind. So the more access we can provide at party conference and our messages, the better. Just one of our sort of responses to the 2017 general election, Eric Pickles produced a report on the campaigning, etc. And we were heavily criticised for not having accessible formats made for our manifesto. And it was poor. So in the recommendations, we said that they must be available, and they were available well in time for the 2019 general election. So that's where sort of, we've been trying to sort of push the party to be more accessible, and slowly but surely we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, sort of thinking around you and I both are aware of the number of the population of disabled people, at nearly 14 million in the UK, and that's about 22% of the total population. So when you're in that world, we all get it's a no-brainer, and particularly in sort of government, it's absolutely about representing the people and the democratic process. I mean, as sort of things have gone over decades and more recent years, like has there been a push back, or is it more of a just not thinking about it in the first place around disability and inclusion?
I think often it's just not thinking about it, because so many other sort of considerations, sort of especially when policies are being drawn up. But what we're trying to do is to ensure that the voice of disabled people is actually heard for any of these policy developments, because just looking at the COVID issue, the lack of BSL interpretation of daily briefings was appalling. And it took too long for it to be there. So we as the CDG wrote to the minister to sort of try and get him to sort of move and get BSL sort of as part of the daily briefing. Sort of, and also the some of the issues around sort of people being sort of forgotten, disabled people being forgotten in the pandemic. More work needs to be done to ensure that disabled people are sort of part of the thinking when we have pandemics or any policy decisions.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the end, it's always back to representation and nothing about us without us. And if you've not got disabled people round the table where policies get made, and you've not got disabled people in Parliament and in the different parties, then that's why no one thinks about it, right? Because if no one's there to speak about it, then it's not going to get brought up on an agenda or as a consideration. So that movement to having more participation, I can see, is very much the theoretical solution, right?
Well, I'm hoping it will improve going forward with the establishment of the Disability Commission, which has been chaired by Lord Shinkwin, and the National Disability Strategy. I'd hope that those would be, a way of sort of bringing disability further up the agenda. And also sort of the regional stakeholder networks, which I chair, the Southeast Network, and that's to try and bring sort of disabled people's voices and views to government. So I'm hoping with some of those initiatives that we can sort of really get disabled people's voices heard.
Yeah, and I think you very sort of basically mentioned the difficulties we've seen on a policy level for disabled people, within the pandemic, and have acknowledged the BSL issue. So it's great that you're very aware of the party's shortcomings and that you're doing your best to address that. We've got a question from LinkedIn from Carol Davidson, and I've brought it up on the screen, but I'll read it out as well. She says, "Do you feel the party listens to your members / ideas?"
At times in the past, there hasn't been enough listening and understanding. I think that's changing now because only 2 weeks ago, the CDG had a meeting with the party chair, who's asked for us to help them develop a disability strategy for the party. So for us, that's a big step forward. If the chair, sort of wants it to be done, then then everybody at CCHQ will sort of look to try and sort of push. And as disabled people ourselves, as in the CDG, we want to help the party, become more accessible. So there is that listening, and hopefully there's going to be that learning being taken forward by the party.
Yeah, and I guess it takes time, but then in the end, it's action as well as listening, isn't it?
Exactly. So, we've put down a few of the kind of wants that we want the party to do to really sort of show its commitment. And we're going to be sort of ourselves, say, helping the party, but also holding the party to account. Because, if we don't do this as a member and as somebody with a disability, I'll be very annoyed if we weren't making progress on it. So, yeah.
Sorry, Barry, I was just going to say, because obviously we totally understand that, the day we have a disabled prime minister, or a prime minister that is has disclosed, or is proudly mentioning that they have a disability, is that sort of proper where you've got disability really represented at the top. And at the minute, I totally understand your point about having more than 5 MPs in Parliament, as it's way lower than what the sort of population of disabled people is. But what about within the party? Do you have any way of knowing what sort of percentage of the party have a disability, the members?
Okay, unfortunately, those figures haven't been collected.
Sure.
It's not asked. So, but as part of the whole candidate process, we are sort of updating the diversity monitoring forms and asking candidates to complete those forms. We've had to do a bit of work on the sort of terminology, and that's so to make it sort of worthwhile. So, because for Parliament we have gender and ethnicity sort of monitored, but no disability.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, I imagine, is part of the process that you're you're going through at the minute anyway. But yeah, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, sort of, of the members with a disability, and even a bit of listening of what they, what they experience and what they would like. I mean, so how, when you say the Conservative Disability Group, is that a sort of membership of the members that are coming forward to be on the CDG?
Yeah, so anybody who's a member of the full Conservative Party can become a member of the CDG.
Yeah.
So, the criteria is you have to be a member of the party itself.
Yes, that makes sense. And what sort of numbers have you got at the CDG then?
I think we've got over 100 members at the moment. So, and it's been increasing. Numbers had dropped off at one stage, but it is now increasing again.
Yeah.
And that's because of, I think, some of the actions we're taking and some of the events we've been hosting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's be remiss to sort of say that obviously the austerity policies of 2010 had and have impacted disabled people. And we all get it's different. Disability is a large group, and there's, within that, there's different party affiliations, there's different lifestyle, different, all sorts of differences. Not just because someone has a disability doesn't make everyone the same. But yeah, I think the stats showed that there was a lot of negative consequences for certain parts of the disabled population. I'd be interested in your thoughts as we have the pandemic and that there's going to be economic consequences. I read Boris is saying we won't go back to austerity. I mean, how do you think it's going to play out from the 2008 crash to sort of the relevant, not crash, but the recession we're going to be going through with the pandemic? It's interesting to get general thoughts on that.
Okay, well, I'm hoping we don't go back into I can't even think of the word. Because Boris is talking about building the way out of austerity and to prevent it, which, okay, that sounds good. Hopefully the buildings will be fully accessible to everybody, because the last thing you want is building more inaccessible buildings. And it's been extremely disappointing how some disabled people had been treated through the whole austerity program of the 2010s, and that's so. This is why I think that having disabled people at the table giving views, because they probably the government weren't being told the impact some of their policies would have had on disabled people. And so they need to know that, and so therefore if Boris is correct in what he's going to do, then hopefully that impact isn't going to be as great as it was before, and hopefully disabled people can go with everybody else and prosper with everybody else.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that's the economic fallout of the pandemic, which we're not even we're still in the more of the crisis side of the pandemic, and obviously the recovery is going to take a while on the economic side. But I mean, from when Corona arrived in the UK, no one knows exactly when, but earlier in the year, what's been your view of how the virus has impacted disabled people, and maybe some of the areas where more representation disabled people could have influenced a better outcome there as well?
Well, the government has been slow, and and I've been sort of happy to say that it's been slow on sort of making and understanding how it's impacting on disabled people. My wife and I are visually impaired, and the issues we had about trying to get our shopping delivered. We've been part of an online delivery service with a certain sort of large supermarket for many years. But my wife had to sort of ring them up and say, well, this is our situation. And fortunately, it works for us, but it hadn't worked for many people. Now that has to be sort of understood why and how it can be improved if there's another pandemic in the future. So therefore, disabled people aren't struggling to get food and don't have to rely on some of these food boxes that so we need to be put in place and using sort of also some of the terminology. One of the words gets used is vulnerable.
Yeah.
I personally don't consider myself vulnerable. I know some people may feel that sort of describes their situation, and that's fine. But not all disabled people are vulnerable. But we do need sort of some adjustments made. So therefore, we're not at the back of the queue.
Yeah, when I was chatting to Baroness Jane Campbell over the weekend about this, I'd been really pondering since the Black Lives Matter movement surging after the horrible death of George Floyd. And obviously we had Gay Pride over the weekend, which marks the occasion of the Stonewall riots. I believe it was like 50 years, 40, 50 years ago, but essentially a very tragic thing that happened that sparked a movement there. And I was bouncing with Jay, there's so many injustices disabled people have faced over the years, but what could be the way that we create a narrative that will change the narrative, quite frankly, from sort of the dependency and the sympathy and pity that's too often come with it. And then she felt that idea about being labeled vulnerable has been a big issue because everyone, disabled or not, has moments that they are vulnerable. That it's a fleeting effect of environmental circumstances, but we are not vulnerable all the time as people, as you say, particularly when we have the investment and the inputs like independent living or accessible buildings, all those things around the social model. That means that we're not vulnerable. And so I think you're right that wording or branding, if you like, has been very counterproductive. I mean, is there a way to wrestle that to the ground and get a different label that's more empowering?
I would hope so. I don't know how we would do it at the moment. I think a lot more thought needs to be taken on that. So, but I try to always see that and often it's seen as a cliche, but look at the ability of a person as opposed to their disability. Just because I can't see doesn't mean that I can't sort of undertake the vast majority of roles and so on.
But obviously, you need to be able to get your food shop on a basic human rights level.
Well, this is it, and a lot of it also comes down to attitudes. I remember when I stood locally again in one of our local elections here, and people were being told that Barry wouldn't be able to represent you because he's blind. So when we wrote to the residents who said, well, sorry, but Mr. Blunkett was blind and he became Home Secretary and Education Secretary. So, we're at a lower local level, which one I was going for. So, and unfortunately, people still have those negative attitudes. And that was very disappointing because that was the year of the Olympics in 2012, where I'd hoped that attitudes would change.
It's about attitudinal change in the end, because from attitudinal change, we'll understand the benefit of investing in. Like, I'm in a wheelchair, so I need that investment from my government for me to be mobile and independent. But once I've got that available to me, I can then, as I do, work and travel and all the things everybody wants to do. So I think it's investment to make a level playing field, and then that opportunities that we all want to go off on our ambitions can take their own courses there afterwards. I think that thing about changing attitude has been a really important point. Got a few questions, sort of comments and questions coming in, Barry. At the beginning, Chris, who introduced us, said, "Good morning, Barry and Martin," and he said, "Do not mention Liverpool." I've now mentioned it by reading that out, but do I presume that means you're a Liverpool fan?
Yes,
Well,
I'm a lifelong Liverpool fan, and used to be a season ticket holder, and so extremely pleased that the football season got back up and running again.
yeah,
And
to say the least.
you know,
Congratulations anyway
it
on the
had,
victory.
thank you. It had been a long time.
And then Chris asked a bit later, can the CDG influence policy? And we've sort of touched upon it a bit, but it's probably good to clarify that.
So yeah, so that's what we're aiming to do. And as I mentioned earlier, the party's developing our disability strategy.
Yeah.
So, and then hopefully then that helps us feed into the sort of the thinking of governments as well, because if the party is promoting accessibility and inclusion, then hopefully that feeds through the members through to parliaments, local governments, etc.
Yeah, yeah. And it's similar but different. Jonathan Attenborough wrote, does the Conservative Disability Group have any input into or consult with DWP schemes like Access to Work, PIP, etc.? I know when we said at the beginning your personal background's not around benefits and all the rest of it, but just from the CDG perspective, is there that connection?
No, because we work within the party itself as opposed to government departments. So there might be some members within the CDG themselves who their external work might be, sort of on sort of representative boards with DWP. But for the CDG itself, was just party orientated.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Craig's asked a couple of times who I'm talking to, because I've got up on the screen that the Conservative Disability Group share the work for disabled people in politics. So for Craig's perspective, it's Barry Ginley is your name.
Yeah, and I'm the deputy chair of the CDG.
Deputy chair. Yeah. So that's for you, Craig. Carol from LinkedIn again. Actually, that was a question I wanted to ask too. Was she's asking, does the Minister for Disabled People meet with you? And I did want to ask where the Minister for Disabled People has been in general. Whether that's something you can answer or not, it's up to you. But Carol's question's a bit softer. Do you meet with the Minister for Disabled People?
Okay, well, he came and spoke at our AGM just before lockdown, which was great that he came to do that. Mm-hmm. And we do make written representation to him on many different issues, so such as the BSL issue with the daily briefings, also with the sort of issue about people with learning disabilities being locked up in units, and that because we think that needs to be addressed and ended. And so we do make our views known to him, and that's so whether he gets to read our views and whether it gets to his aides and so on, we do get a response. We had a response from the BSL letter we sent. Mm-hmm. So but whether the minister actually himself hears directly, but we do include him in a lot of our correspondence to ensure that we're feeding our views through to him.
Yeah, I mean, I've said I'm tempering my thoughts on the minister, and I'm not in any way pointing them to you, as I appreciate it's a different part, but I do wonder who the minister is sort of, basically that how he is getting input from disabled people, and I'm not seeing a lot of results and impact from that. And if nothing else, if you could feed that back from me.
Sure. Okay, well, I will do, but one of the ways I know is looking to get inputs, and again it's with one of my other hats as chair of the South East Regional Network, which is set up by the Disability Unit in Cabinet Office, is that I've been feeding back some comments from our regional network, and I know other chairs have as well,
Mm.
to the unit. So we're hoping that, again, that information gets fed to him, because that's the aim of the regional networks,
Mm. Mm.
so on. So I'm hoping that that information gets back to him.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So Gavin is saying, just shouted at my computer screen when I heard of the person saying that Barry couldn't represent them. Still shouting at my screen now. So yeah, that injustice obviously struck a
Yeah,
chord with Gavin and the viewers.
yeah, and other sorts of diverse groups have probably gone through all of this as well in the past.
Mm.
It's a shame that these attitudes are still sort of
Yeah.
out, and that's so. But you know, we we carry on, and what sort of one of our projects is, as I say, is to try and get more people to become candidates and get them elected.
Yeah.
So therefore, the more disabled people are seen to be part of society, as
Mm.
opposed to being on the margin of society. Hopefully that, and we spoke about attitudes earlier, hopefully that will begin to change
Yeah. Yeah.
attitudes.
I think you're right. I mean, you mentioned 2020, and it was sad that you experienced it the same year of the Olympic and Paralympic Games in London. But that definitely did shift things in the media. There's a lot more representation of disabled people, I think, now than 8 years ago in general sort of media, not just presenting, but behind the scenes. You could, like BBC and Channel 4 are doing a lot around that. I think we've seen a lot around the valuable 500 and other initiatives in the business world. So it sounds and feels like Sarah and Leighton on Friday and yourself, and doing it in sort of different ways and through different vehicles. But it's essentially, let's get the participation and representation of disabled people up in politics, and the theory goes that that will result in better outcomes and policies because people are more at the decision making table as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not going to happen overnight.
No,
It is going to take time. I, like most disabled people, would like it to have happened, from the very outset of the Disability Discrimination Act.
of course, yeah.
But you know, there's always pushback against these things. But then there's also, ways of taking it forwards. Just looking at the DDA, not the greatest piece of legislation ever written, but being British, we tend to sort of try and implement more than most. Speaking to friends and colleagues in the States, and they've got the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is much more powerful, but more underutilized. So I got criticised by one disability media outlet last year about my views about the United Nations and some of their documentation and reports, and criticising the UK. Yes, we're not perfect, but we're a hell of a long way down the line than what other countries are on disability. We still have a long way to go, but say we're a lot longer down the road than most.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? We all have to put our hands up when people have been failed to the most basic of human rights levels, and apologize and acknowledge wrongdoings. But at the same time, if we can learn from that and make changes, as you are clearly driving and trying your best on a personal level, and others in the CDG, but part, as you say, like, not to go into the sort of party politics, we put party politics aside. In the end, from a disabled inclusion point of view, we want policies that recognise disabled people in healthcare, social care, business, leisure, and that's the outcome everybody wants, isn't it? So
Well, I once raised an issue with a friend and said, it'd be great if the different parties in the country could come together and agree a coordinated cross-party approach on disability.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend looking at Friday's episode and
Yeah,
potentially connecting with Sarah and Leighton if you haven't already, because they are wanting to. They're doing it in Wales and it's cross-party, so they're very similar to what you're proposing is already happening in Wales. So I think there could be,
that'd
yeah,
be great, because I've had some pushback when we looked at it here, and that's so people were coming from all of our own entrenched views, but we shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves. We should be sort of working all together, regardless of our politics. At the end of the day, we want more accessibility for disabled people.
well, it's the needs and wants of disabled people, isn't it? If that's what leads, if that's the compass and the voice of disabled people is at the heart, then it can't go that wrong. If it gets hijacked for party politics, then it's not for the needs and wants of disabled people.
And I'm fairly thick-skinned. Obviously, you have to be when you sort of call yourself a Tory, have a
Yeah,
disability. And I was recently called a self-loathing masochist who has lots of money because of being a disabled Tory.
right.
Well, one of those, and that's so. But it's when you get, some people get told those kind of things and they think, I'm not going to do this anymore. And it's a case of, and we lose a lot of good people who are trying to promote inclusion, accessibility. And because of those negatives, often from other disabled people as well. And just because, people don't agree with my politics doesn't make me a bad person. We're all working for the same ends.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate is politics globally at the moment, and there's the Brexit division, there's the party politic division, and particularly when I say US and UK, it's more just because what I'm more aware of, and I know it's going on in a lot of countries, but yeah, I think that tribalism can become very damaging for the greater good, and yeah, we have to try and again learn from mistakes. I think forgiveness is undervalued, but I as I said earlier, I think there's been things that have happened in the last 10 years that is hard for those individuals and their families to forgive for obvious reasons.
And I understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know you do. I know you do. But it's yeah, I think this conversation is fantastic to have, really, because I'm not a Tory, and yet we've actually had a very nice chat about disability and inclusion. I've understood lots of things you're doing that I think is really fantastic. So yeah, good luck with everything, Barry. It'd be great to see how this initiative evolves, and it'd be great if you come back on in a year and let us know the progress and how things are going. It'd be lovely to catch up again. There's some a Liverpool fan who's a friend of mine running riot on the Facebook chat, and Christopher Wood has got hashtag unbearable. So I think it's also nice to have that bit of football humour amongst it, so
Yeah.
it's not all too
Well,
heavy. But yeah,
well, because football was actually my first foray, if you like, into accessibility after losing
right.
my sight 26 years ago.
Mm,
And I went to a game with a friend and she had to commentate for me. So then I worked with RNIB and we eventually set up soccer sites
yeah,
to work with clubs,
brilliant.
and also the BBC to train commentators. So that's how I initially got into to accessibility, and
Yeah.
so and
It's
and
universal, isn't it? Whether you are like I'm a Tottenham fan, you're a Liverpool fan, like we still want to just enjoy the game. And I think obviously the stakes at politics are higher than with football matches, but in the end, everyone has just different views and perspectives. It's like the rich tapestry of life. But I think we have to respect and work together more. And but with accessibility, as I said, it's universal. It's someone's either included or they're not. And as long as that's the compass we're all going by, I think it's great to have these discussions and push things forward. Cool. Craig saying, why are we still using the medical model example, the word disabled? It is medical model. Just to say, Craig, that from my perspective, the social model is we're disabled people by the barriers of society. So the word disabled in that context is very, very social model, not medical model. But happy to have a longer chat offline another time if you want to discuss that further. But for me, the social model is about barriers and we're disabled by those barriers. So just a quick tangent there. Barry, anything you want to mention before we finish?
No, just thank you for allowing us to come on and discuss sort of how we're making politics more accessible, and and sort of I'm pleased that you're doing these interviews. So thank you very much.
Great. And I said to you, Barry, I say to everyone else watching, do check out Friday's interview as well, because it's very similar to what we've talked about. And I think it's nice to get more of this out there about, politics and inclusion and representation doesn't have to all be party politics and tribalism. So yeah, definitely have a watch of that. But likewise, Barry, thank you for coming on the show. And yeah, I'd say just keep us updated. If people are watching, I imagine there's a Conservative Disability Group sort of website and contact, is there?
Yes, there is. There's the Conservative Disability Group website, and there's also a Twitter account, which is at @the_C_D_G. It's a bit of a mouthful, that one. So, so we are out there. So, do sort of go and have a look and see what we're doing. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, have a great day, Barry, and everyone watching. I'll be back tomorrow for the next episode at midday. And the tech held up as well, Barry, which is good. All right. Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.